A $3 trillion deficit. This is October of 2020. We are in the most important quarter in the history of the United States. Can the United States survive a $3 trillion deficit? Let me ask you a question. Can we survive a $10 trillion deficit? What about a $100 trillion deficit? So there is a economic concept out there called modern monetary theory. And if you haven't heard of it, you ought to check it out. The main idea behind it is that governments are not like households or businesses where your funds, your expenditures are limited to the income you bring in, not factoring consumer debt and credit, but basically the income you bring in, you have to budget it for your living expenses, and then you have discretionary spending. The modern monetary theory suggests that governments are not held to those constraints of spending, that they can simply print as much money as they want in order to borrow and spend and pay for whatever they want. So it's a pretty interesting concept. The question is, how big can our national debt be? Well, if you look at the average individual and what you can borrow for a house or for cars or things like that, you have to have a certain debt to income ratio, but you can lever up, like in real estate, business, things like that, banks, you can lever up 10 to 1 to your liquid reserves, 30 to 1 to your liquid reserves, things like that. So if the United States has liquid reserves, or a GDP, of 20, 30 trillion dollars, or whatever it is, then how far up can they lever that? So if you look at GDP as income for the United States, well, that's gross national product. So then, you got to look at the tax revenue. How much tax revenue does the United States bring in? So let's say it's $1 trillion in tax revenue collected. How far up can they lever that $1 trillion? Can they lever it 3 times, 5 times, 10 times? Can they borrow infinitely? Because we are the world's reserve currency. Everybody wants our treasuries. And they know that no matter what, the United States can print money to pay the debt and will never default ever. So they know that they have their yield no matter what, which is basically an annuity. And who buys those treasuries? Who buys our debt when they know all we are doing is printing? That would be sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, institutional investors, and annuity investors, life companies, insurance companies looking for guaranteed income. So if they know that the United States can print the debt service, then do they really care how much we're actually printing as long as we make those payments, as long as they get a return on their investment? Do they really care how it's generated? So that's a question of modern monetary theory. The second thing is, how will it impact and affect inflation? So if the government, just prints all the money they want to spend on roads, bridges, infrastructure, energy efficiency, environmental, the Green New Deal, that kind of stuff, and mandates those types of programs, national health care, national education, guaranteed employment, things like that, how does that affect inflation? So those are the questions that are asked when you study modern monetary theory. It's a pretty interesting concept. It is the mainstream topic of today, given the national deficit, where we're headed, and how we're going to pay for it. And there's people on both sides of the aisle. It's a very interesting debate. So if you haven't heard of it, check out Modern Monetary Theory and leave a comment. What are your thoughts? Can the United States borrow an infinite amount of money as long as they can print to service the debt? Can Congress vote to spend as much money as they want on anything they want without creating hyperinflation? And what is the impact of a national debt 3, 5, 10, 20 times the collected revenue of the taxes in the United States? Those are the questions. Put your comments down there. It'll be interesting to hear what you have to say. Check out the debates, Modern Monetary Theory. I think it's an interesting conversation, interesting topic, and it'll be an interesting experiment if we get a blue wave and we start heading in that direction with some socialist policies and with the institution of modern monetary theory, which is what you will see if we have a blue wave. So very interesting times.